Hello, and welcome to the 51st episode of Course Place. I'm so glad you've chosen to join me for today's conversation. In today's episode, I'll be talking about a short weekend trip I went on for a conference with some friends of mine. As always, if you like what you hear, please leave a review and/or comments, follow my podcast, and tell your friends. Also, please follow the podcast page I've made on Facebook. If you'd like to contact me via email instead of a Facebook message, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org. If you are new here, welcome. I'm your host, Cora, and I am so excited to have you on this journey with me. Today, I want to share some of my favorite parts from a trip I went on with some friends of mine in November 2024. This episode will be about the trip I mentioned briefly at the end of episode 49. I am so excited to get to share the story of the experience with you, and I really hope you enjoy listening to the episode. Let's go ahead and dive in. To be honest, it is definitely a challenge to try and adequately describe just how absolutely amazing the trip was. It definitely goes on my list of my favorite trips I have ever been on. My only disappointment with that trip is that it was way too short. It was only an overnight trip for one night. It was still a blast regardless of that, though. I will back up to the day before I left. That day was a Thursday. I had a few things I needed to do that day in preparation for the trip. Thankfully, it all went smoothly, and I was able to get everything done that I needed to. The things I needed to do was mostly just packing, making some muffins that I was taking to share for breakfast that Saturday morning, and calling a friend. The muffins I made were from a recipe my grandma sent me and that she has made before. They were banana nut chocolate chip muffins. As of the recording of this episode, that is probably my top favorite kind of muffin to make and eat as long as I use my grandma's recipe. I think everyone, or most everyone, took food to share for Saturday morning, but at least a few people brought food to share for Friday night once we got back to our Airbnb after the conference. Anyway, back to talking about the conference. That Friday, I had a little bit of packing left to finish, but it was pretty much just my last minute things that I had still needed that day/night before leaving, so I needed to get that finished up. Once I was ready to go, my dad and I drove about a half an hour or so from my house out to the agreed upon meeting point where I would meet up with some of the women I went to the event with. We had to take a couple of cars to the event because there were not enough seats for everyone to go all together in one car, and a couple of people came later that Friday and met us at the church. Once I was with my friends, we drove about an hour or so to our Airbnb that we would be staying in that night to check in before heading to dinner and the conference. We went to a Mexican place that had absolutely amazing and super delicious chips. After dinner, we all loaded up in the cars again and drove over to the church where the event was held. The event that evening was so incredible. Lots of great music, the messages were great, and it was also nice to spend time with some of the friends that I have had for most of my life. I didn't know everyone in our group, but I knew most everyone. I met 2 women who were in the group that I went with, and that was fun too. After the conference was over for that night, we went back to the Airbnb and just talked/hung out together while eating snacks. For my Friday night snack that I took to share, I picked up a bag of discount Halloween candy that I had found at a grocery store, so that was pretty simple. There were other snacks too that were pretty yummy. After we did that for a little while, we all got ready for it and went to bed. Going to sleep that night was challenging for me, and I did not really sleep much. It was okay though. I had actually kind of expected it for 2 reasons. One was that I was somewhere I wasn't used to, and the other was because I usually tend to have a hard time falling asleep when I am wound up or excited, but also whenever I'm in a new environment outside of what I'm used to. It wasn't ideal to get less sleep than I usually would, but it ended up fine. I wasn't surprised that I got less sleep than usual. It's possible that I was wound up from the day, and that's why I couldn't sleep, or it was just because I was in a new environment, but I'm not exactly sure of the ultimate cause. That Saturday, we all woke up early, had breakfast, packed up a little bit, went back to the conference, and then some of us stopped back to the Airbnb to finish a couple of things the Airbnb hosts had asked us to do, and to make sure we had gotten all of our stuff. Then, we started the drive back home. We stopped at one point to get some food for a late lunch/early dinner, and that was yummy. The only difference of my getting home on that day was that it was my mom picking me up at the same agreed upon point instead of my dad like he had dropped me off the day before. I was definitely tired after that weekend, but it was a good tired. It was such an incredible weekend, and I would do it all over again for sure. There were honestly so many amazing parts about the actual conference. It's hard to try and adequately describe it all in words that could match the experience, but I will try my best to do that. The worship was great. I loved getting to hear one of my favorite authors, Jennifer Rothschild, speak. I had never heard her speak before then, but she's an absolutely amazing author, speaker, singer, and musician. She's actually blind from an eye disease that she had been diagnosed with when she was younger, but she is still absolutely incredible. I bought 2 of her books at the conference, and then I also bought one by Margaret Feinberg as well. That is amazing. Margaret Feinberg was one of the other speakers at the event. I was able to get the one by her signed, so that was wonderful. I wanted to get the ones by Jennifer signed, but I unfortunately did not get a chance to do so because the line to see her was really long. Maybe I will get another opportunity to go see her speak again someday, and then I could even get a picture with her possibly. Hearing Margaret speak was pretty cool too. I thought everyone that was a speaker or an artist at the event did a wonderful job, as well as all the other staff needed to run the event. Some of my main highlights of that weekend were hearing Jennifer speak, getting to spend time with some of my friends that I don't see very often, being able to briefly get away with friends, the worship, delicious food, and getting to hear other wonderful messages too. It was a much needed weekend for sure, and one that I want to treasure for the rest of my life. In episode 49, I mentioned one of the things that was said over the weekend by one of the speakers that I thought was so good. As far as other things I enjoyed that the speakers said, there were several things. I will list some of them here, but they won't necessarily be in order, and they aren't all from just one person. They were, God's got me, His grace is sufficient, grace is something we do not deserve. An acronym for the word grace that was taught is grasp loosely, respond, not react, apologize or forgive, choose your words well, and empathize before evaluating. The last takeaway from the conference that I want to share with you in this episode is, if God allows it, I need to embrace it. I thought that last takeaway was really good and something I need to keep in mind in my life on a regular basis. However, to be honest, I really like all of the takeaways I had, and I probably need to remember all of those in my life every day at some point or another. With the last takeaway, and why I think it's important to remember on a regular basis, I have more thoughts on that. I guess one thing that comes to mind would be, we are going to have trials in this life, both big and small. We can embrace trials, even though it can seem really difficult to do that, and at times, even impossible. That is definitely something I need to remember in my own life, because I tend to not want to embrace trials that I face. I am not in any way a professional at this kind of thing, or at life, so please use caution if you follow advice or help that I may give in any episode. I am only a human, so I will not get things perfect all the time. I just want to share ideas with you in hopes that if you try them, they might help, but I cannot make any promises or guarantees on whether they will or not. Back to the conference. Another thing about it that I want to share is that the speakers there did a fun Q&A segment that I enjoyed listening to. Basically with that, the attendees each received a blank index card and were supposed to write questions for that segment that might be answered. Unfortunately, my questions were not directly answered, but that is okay. I can't remember what all of the questions were that did get answered, though. I thought that segment was good. There was also a super fun photo booth for the attendees to take pictures together in with fun little props. My group got a couple of pictures, and that was pretty cool. I liked that part a lot. It was fun getting to choose what props to use in the pictures. That event is definitely something I would recommend for sure. It was totally amazing and one of the best events I have ever attended. I am so thankful I got to have the opportunity to go. I wish it could have been longer, but it was still such a fun weekend to be with some friends and get to grow spiritually together. It was an amazing event, but it was over way too quickly. If I ever get a chance, I would love to go to something like that again. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please follow, leave a comment, and a review of my podcast if you haven't already, and please follow my podcast page on Facebook so you never miss an update. If you have any verses you'd like me to read on a future episode, or if you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org, or you can send me a message on my podcast page on Facebook through the link in the show notes, and I will get back to you when I can. Hope you tune in next week for the 52nd episode.